Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with Batgirl. As we make our way to issue 25, we've seen Cassandra make a secret pact to regain her lost battle prowess, let her father escape over sentimentality, and fail to save an innocent despite her best efforts. Next, she faces the longer arm of the law, which she'll probably break depending on the situation. Issue 13's cover sees a CIA agent presenting his badge as B-Girl decks him. Nice reflection on the metal, by the way. We begin with Cass, in civilian attire, standing between four guys in black suits and a dude hiding behind the crates, who's narrating this thing in the present day. They've all got laser sights on her, and she waits for them to open fire. She proceeds to dodge their bullets in a way that put the Matrix films to shame, jumps on one of them like she was the distant cousin of one of the Mario brothers, then proceeds to drop these suckers one by one. Her bullet-dodging ability has been criticized a few times that I've seen, and it's understandable why, especially when you consider that bullets fired from a handgun travel typically anywhere between 600 and 2,000 feet per second. And when you consider she was barely 10 feet away, or so it would appear, suspension of disbelief can wane pretty easily. However, I think we can excuse this because of her body reading abilities and her tutelage with firearms being big factors here. Also, I like the character, so shut up. The last suit shows off his CIA badge and claims the man she's protecting, the guy with the sniper rifle strapped to his back, is a terrorist. After looking at the alleged assassin and back at the agent, it's the latter she knocks out. She takes the guy out the back, but only for them to suddenly strike poses. Yeah, the implication is that they've been cornered by more CIA, probably with lights shining on them, but it's not well represented in this panel. Perhaps if the lighting were a bit more enhanced and we pulled back to see some other agents training guns on them, it may have been better portrayed. But we do have the fugitive's dialogue explaining it, so I guess it sort of evens out. We jump to a dark room where the so-called terrorist is being interrogated and punched in the face because he doesn't know why a highly skilled stranger would fight on his behalf. Clearly, she was acting out the parable of the Good Samaritan, but with awesome kung fu to make it entertaining for modern audiences. Hey, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with your version, I'm just saying sometimes suckers gotta get punched. Fine, fair point. Naturally, the cigarette-smoking jerk is upset about his interrupted golf game and demands to know why his captive, an Agent Johnson, one of the best snipers out of the FBI, someone the CIA utilized twice before without incident, failed to eliminate his target. His intended victim, a woman in a moving car, seemed to have looked right at him, practically eye to eye, and as impossible as that seems, he just couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger. When asked if the terrorist carried out her plot, Smokey and his buddy just laugh. Turns out that woman wasn't a terrorist at all, nor were his two previous targets, and he goes on some spiel about how the nation is so powerful and intricate, and explaining why those people had to die would be too time-consuming. They spoiled Avengers Endgame for you, didn't they? I had the tickets in my pocket and they go and blab about it online, with no regard to the friends of their friends on Facebook. You could have just stayed off social media until you saw it. Oh, now you're using rational thinking. I'm glad I'm about to kill you. Johnson's all set up to die in a staged shootout and posthumously labeled a terrorist. They even have tomorrow's paper all set up to convince the public. But first, Smokey wants to try getting answers out of his protector, who zips through the open crack in the door faster than he can see, knocks out the other agent, takes his gun, and forces the lead jackwagon to his knees. Though, notice how she's holding the weapon. Neat as that looks, it's actually an ineffective way of firing, which someone with an assassin dad would know. So either Cass is totally playing him, and he's too dumb to notice, or this is an oversight on the creator's part. Anyway, following the teenager's instructions, Smokey unties Johnson, but warns the girl what he can do to her: hunt her down, destroy her life, and turn her family and friends against her. Her counter warning? That her friends will find him.
which is extra delightful for us since we know exactly who she's talking about. Spotlight-stealing parasites don't count as friends.
Cass leads her manzel in distress past some more agents she took out as she tosses away her gun, and I bet this guy is just like lying on a cabinet with the shadowing. It just looks invisible, but he just looks like a disembodied head floating upside down. After a few more floors, the coloring takes a unique turn as she takes out more than a dozen suits. Maybe they chose this look because the moment is pure gold. And I guess she can fly now because Cass takes a fire hose and sets up a zip line to a neighboring building a couple of floors shorter.
Somewhere, John McClane senses this, looks up to the sky, and nods approvingly.
Johnson uses a rifle to make his way across, and when Cassandra takes a slug to the shoulder, we see that not even his evil plans falling apart can stop Smokey's addiction to nicotine. Or murder. As he readjusts his aim for the guy he was trying to set up, he finds the sharpshooter had stopped himself along the tether just enough to destroy Smokey's rifle in one shot, leaving him and Cass free to amscray. Eventually they're at a train station, probably the next day given that the paper reads terrorist bomb scare instead of a frame-up piece. Cass hands the former agent an envelope with a new identity to start over. Johnson's a little apprehensive given everything he was a part of, but Cass flashes back earlier, when she saw him being pursued by the first goons of many she'd take out. When a young boy was in the way, Johnson instinctively leapt over him, whereas his adversaries just trampled the kid without hesitation. That showed the man's true nature and explains why Cass intervened. Also, probably why she didn't get her costume on. No time to suit up, I suppose. She begins to leave, but the guy says he doesn't even know her name. All she does is smile, but the credits panel seem to give that answer for her, headed by Batgirl.
And since it was never indicated on any other page as an alternative, I guess this issue of Batgirl is subtitled Batgirl. Kinda weird, but when you consider she didn't act any differently out of costume than she would have in costume, it's pretty fitting, thematically speaking.
This one's kinda non-linear, but a quick read, and in some ways not too different from previous issues. Cassandra intervening to save someone, all the while her moral code worn on her sleeve, even though she's wearing a tank top in this one. Revisiting this, it did feel kind of odd how she was running around without a costume, since she went to great lengths to get it back, and even when she wasn't allowed, she was still hiding her identity. But, like I said, her intervention was spur of the moment and there wasn't time. And on a more unrelated matter, I'm kind of exhausted with the clandestine governmental body killing people for no reason other than a supposed greater good shtick.
And I'm not saying that government officials can't be corrupt or mistaken ever, but after years of armchair detectives drawing attention to their objectively stupid fantasies, cheapening real-life tragedies by claiming they were faked, for example, characters like old Smokey here kind of lose their farcical appeal and just remind you of the unfortunately too real morons making bad situations worse.
Then we arrive at issue 14, with a cover that sees Batman's face in the background, while the maskless title character is actually covered pretty well by her hair. Though once the wind dies down, it's going to be much less effective. A man named Tom walks into his office with his work and breakfast all prepared by his secretary, and he happily begins on case 547, a video of Cassandra laying the smackdown on the CIA agents before retrieving the guy they were betraying. Analysis claims her speed is just over 4 times baseline, and strength about 2.5, and her combat shows no dominant school using unique combinations from a variety of styles. A scientist, John, barges in thinking he's being played because 547 has wacky blood chemistry and off-the-charts levels of serotonin, the neurotransmitter sending messages throughout the brain. Another guy, Jim, is video conferencing in, saying she's a metahuman, but John shoots that idea down when 2 tests showed negative for the metagene. Jim, dumbfounded by this, says that while the individual moves are borderline human speed, it's the aggregate speed that suggests meta. Sure, people can do a lot of impressive physical feats individually, but all at once would be considered impossible to coordinate mentally. That only leaves cybernetic implants as a possible explanation, and Tom suggests searching through a master genetic database in Langley. But John smugly replies that he already did that, and there is no match for 547. She doesn't exist.
So if the skinny teenage girl that beat up our agents like they were nothing didn't exist, then our agents were never beat up at all. Their deep tissue bruises and broken bones were all in their head. Tell them to get out of the infirmary and back to work.
We return to the train station where apparently 0 time has passed. Johnson stops Cassandra, wanting to thank her for what she's done, and she happily accepts a handshake. Well, I say no time passed, but I guess in between issues, Cass removed that bandage for her bullet wound in the middle of a crowded station. It hits the former agent that he may as well be dead, since he can't contact any family or friends of her again with his very real-looking new ID. But he still offers Cass his help in the unlikely event they ever meet again. At the clock tower, Babs notes how Cass went out without her costume, busting the heads of a government agency, and this jeopardizes any future she may have. David Kane made sure to wipe any records of her, but the CIA now has her on file, and any chance of Cassandra having a job, going to school, having a life outside of Batgirl has just been shot. Her response? So?
I've seen a similar apathetic disregard to secret identities from some post-Flashpoint comics and DC TV shows, but whereas in Cassandra's case it's her naivete and tunnel vision on the whole mission of stopping crime in Gotham, the writers have the much less forgivable excuse of laziness.
Babs seems to relent, probably realizing she's not going to get her point across anytime in the next month, and lets her protege catch some Z's while she gets to work on something else. After a snooze, Oracle is gone, but Batman tells her to get her suit and join him, a prospect she seems to relish if that partially seen smile is any indication. He takes her to a cabin in the woods, no, not the Joss Whedon version, where a group of armed goons are just chilling. Online, they claim to be a security consultant firm, but they're really a hit squad. Turns out, the ex-Agent Johnson called his mom just long enough to be traced, and that led to him being captured without witnesses, taken to a clearing, and shot in the head. Bats gives her the go-ahead to show these guys just exactly how she feels about what they did, instantly appearing inside and not even letting one finish his cliched threat before leaving just one of them left standing. For the moment. He starts to rethink things when she grabs him by his headscarf, and from this angle it looks like she's punching through his head at light speed, then smacks his head onto the table. After being told their victim's last word was about his mom, she makes him go night-night, and then leaves just as Batman says they'll be turned in and maybe someone will look for them.
Unfortunately for Batman, in a sad, ironic twist, the only ones that show up are their disappointed mothers, pulling their ears and smacking them in the face for not finishing dental school.
Driving back into Gotham, Cass is quiet, even for her, with flashbacks to the man she saved, then couldn't, either what actually happened or her estimation based on what Bats told her. He apologizes for her loss and takes her to a cave, one she thinks is his. He says it's actually hers, though ends his statement with a question mark, which is one of those typos that really makes you scratch your head a little. He'd set it up a while ago, but Oracle thought it best for Cass to stay in the clock tower for a while yet. He says he approves of how she wants to use her identity, making her a more effective weapon, and with her face known to the CIA, staying with Babs puts her identity in jeopardy, so the cave will be her home now. If asked if there's anything she needs from her old digs, Cass says no. The Dark Knight gives her the rest of the night off, and we'll see her the next day, leaving Cassandra alone in her cavernous apartment/dojo.
This issue actually presents an interesting premise for Cass, someone with no traditional identity outside her costumed life, now having her bare face plastered for a government agency to see. Sometimes it's hard enough for a crime fighter to keep their identities hidden as it is, when they're written smart enough to keep their masks on.
But here we see the sting of Cassandra saving a life, seeming to have covered extra bases so he can try to have a normal future despite his past, only for the guy's own actions to get him killed. I mean, he was FBI. You'd think he'd have known better than to make himself vulnerable like that. So it's not like Cass should beat herself up over it. After all, that's what goons are for. Then there's Batman's line about her being a more effective weapon. Yeah, not the greatest connotations there. I usually try to frame some of this stuff as Batman not so much being cold-hearted with his sidekicks, as more heavily goal-focused, but not going about it in the smartest way. One could argue that because Cassandra wanted to be Batgirl, wanted to help people so badly, Batman's just doing what he thinks is best to lead her down the proper path, but making mistakes along the way. And at first I was wondering why he had her bring her costume when she didn't wear it during their road trip, but I suppose it was so she'd have it with her when he showed her new digs.
But I think that may have been just another facet in Cassie's overall arc. Part of her struggles include interacting with her surrogate family, and how even they can and will mess up. She can't be the only one with learning curves to deal with.
Bringing us to issue 15, where Joker stands in a keyhole frame of Gotham rooftops, and wow, that neon pink sky is kinda hard to look at, while Bats, Girl, and Man are on the ground, one with a bullet wound in its chest. And yet the weirdest thing about this is how Mr. J's smile kind of looks forced. Maybe he told a joke before pulling the trigger that he's just now realizing wasn't that funny. We begin with a writer struggling to put thoughts to page, which is kinda standard, am I right, folks? When she hears a loud noise, she thinks it's her neighbors being extra loud again, only to find them on the ground as a priestly-looking man, covered in blood, holds a gun. He kisses his crucifix, aims the gun at the writer, and pleads that God have mercy on her soul before opening fire again.
Little help? Well, you're not wrong. Obviously.
He kicks down the door of another apartment, ready to take out the family inside when a batarang puts a stop to that, aided by Batgirl's fist. When taken away by the police, the gunman seems confused, wanting to know what he's doing here, and Cass just thinks he's nuts, only to be called away by the distant sound of a man opening fire on civilians, dressed like he's in a war zone. Well, he kind of is, but only because he made it that way. He tosses a grenade, only for our gal to grapnel launch it to a safe distance, and knock Day at the Office Rambo out cold before it explodes. Two lunatics within 7 blocks of each other could just be another Gotham Friday night, but something glimmering in the distance catches Cassie's eyes. She spots a man on a rooftop with a peculiar contraption, and then we're hit with some funky swirls.
Did you know that there's a direct correlation between the decline of spirograph and the rise in king activity? Think about it.
She wakes up to Batman helping her to her feet, saying she'd been knocked out and that the 2 men she apprehended were driven insane by the Joker. She mentions a machine, but he insists her head injury has made her confused. Insert Dan Didio joke here. She trusts Bats and follows him to the clown's lair, an abandoned circus where none of his men seem to be around. She'll stand guard while he goes after Mr. J, after making sure she's alright. Then he's immediately shot through the chest.
Hey, some people said DC movies are better because of more realism. Why start arguing with the results now?
Joker steps out of the shadows, doing a gory parody of Britney Spears' Oops, I Did It Again, which I have mixed feelings about, not the least of which is him trying to horn in on Weird Al's racket. Cass fails to find a pulse, confirming the Batman is dead. Well now, what am I going to do with all this free time? I guess I could take up needlepoint. Or running.
I know he just murdered Gotham's sworn protector and one of my favorite heroes, but I just can't hate someone that has such excellent comedic timing.
Joker runs off, but not so quickly that Batgirl can't catch up and paralyze him in one strike. She removes her mask and, with her mentor dead, decides his arch-nemesis will die as well. The punch, however, is only fatal for that spiral shooting machine from earlier, and Cass demands to know what just happened. Scientific jargon just annoys her real quick-like, So the man explains that the machine influences the brain to form scenarios wherein the subject decides to kill, leaving them in a catatonic state while the deadly premise is mentally constructed. The priest was influenced by the machine to use religion as a basis for his killing spree, and it took about an hour for that to start. The veteran had his war experiences, and his rampage took 10 minutes to begin. And Batgirl had the death of Batman at the hands of his worst enemy, and her scenario took place in a heartbeat.
Yikes.
Sometime later, Bat stops by, saying he'll be out of town, busy with a prison riot for a few hours, to which Batgirl tells him to be careful.
And that last page gives a lot of the impact for this issue. Cassandra experiences the one situation that would have her throw away everything she's worked for, succumb to her urge to take another life regardless of past experiences, and not only that, it's something she would do in mere seconds. With heroes and heroines that refrain from using lethal force, there's always the question in the audience's mind of what would push them over the edge, and this might be the one that makes the most sense for the character.
It was an appropriate choice, the Joker, often regarded as one of the worst of Batman's rogues, as well as the death of someone Cassandra views as giving her the chance to put her skills to good use, the one whose crest she wants to revolve her life around at this point. I'm not saying I'm of the mind that Joker should just be killed off, or that I like the idea of Cassie killing, but it's definitely a better position as what basically amounts to a dream than the executive-mandated excuse that was canon for a while. And if you're curious as to why I'm not admonishing Cassie for taking her mask off in this situation, it's not because it's a dream, it's because it's a one-time scenario, and not like a certain other character written to take it off in the sheriff's office or in front of the Scarecrow because stupidity.
Personally, I think this would have worked a lot better for this issue, Batman Dies, than issue 11 did. But maybe it was a theme so nice they wanted to use it twice. We're not quite done looking at Batgirl just yet, so tune in next week for 3 more issues in the ongoing. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.